Hello again, Trinity here to welcome you into my exclusive drug world of cannabis. Last episode, I talked to you about all the preparation it took before we could gas up the car and get on the road to get that load. Before I get us on that road, very quickly, I'd like to tell you where we're going exactly. We always drove a triangle. We left Salt Lake and crossed the Utah and Nevada desert. Once we got past Reno, Nevada, we cut up north through Highway 20, or we continued a little further west on Interstate 80 to Sacramento. Then we cut up north on I-5, depending on where we were going exactly or what the weather was like. We continued northwest to work our way up to the Redwood Highway until we got to the Emerald Triangle. Those are the three counties: Humboldt, Mendocino, and Trinity. From there, we might go many places within the triangle, depending on where the brokers could find the product. Once we delivered the money to the broker and picked up the load, we continued on the Redwood Highway up north past Trinity County, and then cut east to Grants Pass as we worked our way up again on Interstate 5 to Portland, Oregon. We usually spent the night in Portland, and then we headed east on Interstate 84 across the entire state of Oregon and Boise, Idaho, onward to Pocatello, and turning south on Interstate 15, which is a straight shot back down to Salt Lake. Occasionally, we would veer off the triangle a bit and go places either like Grass Valley, California, or Yosemite National Park to pick up loads. That was fun. But we always drove a huge triangle that covered the vast states of Utah, Nevada, California, Oregon, and Idaho. The reason we didn't come back with our load on I-80, which was the way we drove out, is because law enforcement considers this major interstate as one of the largest drug corridors in the country. This interstate runs the gamut from Chicago to San Francisco and is patrolled ferociously, particularly, as I've mentioned many times, in Nevada. Nevada is the 7th largest state in the country, but I swear there's a state patrol stationed about every 10 miles. Nevada state cops buddy up with DEA to nab most couriers with money and loads of drugs along that corridor. Remember a few episodes ago when I told you not to look like a hippie or a gangsta when you drive through that state? I had a really good friend who looked like a hippie. Well, actually, he was a hippie who had long blonde dreads. He was going out to pick up a few pounds of weed in the triangle and was carrying $4,000 cash. The Nevada cops pulled him over for following too closely. They shook him down and took his cash and never filed a traffic citation. Oh yeah. Maybe he lost his money because he was naive. He actually thought he had rights. Or maybe the police are nothing more than roving gangs of thugs, stealing from anybody they can. Or maybe I'm right on both counts. That's why we preferred to add an extra day on to driving by going up north through Portland and catching I-84 with the load, avoiding the southern police gangs. Most of the time, we tried to leave Salt Lake City at dawn so we could get out to Humboldt County to the boys' farm before 10 p.m. We always got off the road before 10 p.m. so we didn't attract too much attention from the patrol cars. We felt like we were sitting ducks when we were driving the load and the money after 11 p.m. There's so few cars out there that you feel like you're more noticeable. So we always tried to get off the road when everybody else did too. One of my favorite parts of the trip was at the very beginning as we whizzed past the Great Salt Lake. It's about 15 minutes out of the city. Usually it was dawn and the sun was just peeking over the mountains in the east. The western sky was an ombre of blended colors from indigo purple and pink. If there were clouds out, they would grab the other neon colors like fire orange and rose red. which would have been spectacular enough by itself, but the clear lake would reflect back the colors in the sky and the shadows of the mountains, creating a shimmering mirage with no horizon. The whole sparkly scene looked like it was free-floating in the air. Really, there's just no words to describe how magnificent it was to see the lake blend into the sky. And like the saying goes, so it is on earth, it will be in heaven. So it is in heaven, it will be on earth. After driving only an hour and a half, we hit the state line in Windover, Nevada. Time to change the clocks in the car, set them back an hour. That was my duty. Oh, what a chore. Every single model of rental car has a completely different way of opening the gas tanks or changing the clocks. And being as technically savvy as I was, I always had to get out the manual from the glove compartment and figure it all out. We had to have the correct time because, first of all, we left our smartphones at home and turned our other burner phones completely off till we would get near our destination. Because like I've mentioned in previous episodes, the cops are surveying all the phones and the data out on Interstate 80 with the Stingray technology. And since we started using cell phones years ago, Bob and I don't wear watches anymore, so we depend heavily on the rental car clock. We often had a preordained time and place that we would meet up with the boys, and we couldn't afford to forget that we were on Pacific time, which we've done before. Once we hit the state line in Nevada, we drove for about 7 to 8 hours or more across the entire state. Occasionally, we might stop for a real sit-down breakfast of bacon and eggs at the Windover Peppermill Casino before we got started on the long drive across the state. Kind of get to hang around with all the older couples there's a lot of older couples who spend time out there. At first, I hated driving through all the destitute, beat-up towns like Elko and Battle Mountain and Wells. Those are terrible places to stop. I mean, don't they sort of sound terrible? But those are terrible places to stop because the gas stations were lame and the restaurants were even lamer. When we stopped to get gas, we paid for the gas in cash up front, trying not to leave another digital footstep. We liked stopping at big gas stations like the Pilot and Love stations because they had clean bathrooms until we heard through the grapevine that the cops offer those gas station employees a $500 cash bounty if they turn in any suspicious people that later get arrested. The cops would come into the stations and befriend the employees and give them a direct cell phone number that they could call if they saw any kind of suspicious-looking people or activities. So, if a customer comes into those kinds of stations and those employees can imagine that customer as doing anything shady, they call the state cop direct line, and about 5 minutes after the customer pulls out of the station, they're coincidentally pulled over by the cops for, guess what? Following too closely. That kind of put a damper on us stopping in those stations after a while. We also had the same problem with going to the same gas stations over and over too, because like the rental companies, gas station employees started recognizing us. I'm kind of a distinctive person with my blonde hair, and so I would wear a baseball cap and I would cover up my jewelry and my clothes. I like wearing jewelry. And I would wear a big shirt over my clothes every time I would go to pay for the gas to try to look more innocuous than I do now. Well, Bob would wait outside for me to get the money paid for so he could pump the gas. There are no good places to eat in Nevada except in Windover and Reno. It doesn't really matter whether it was any of the little shit towns or the big sophisticated franchise Pilots and Love stations. None of them really have anything decent to eat but junk food and pop, tuna fish sandwiches at Subways, Big Macs at McDonald's, or quarter pounders at Burger King. Ugh, Gosh, we got so tired of fast food. But to our surprise, we stumbled upon one teeny tiny little gas station in a one-stop sign town of Valmy. Valmy, Nevada. That's right, Valmy. This little gas station restaurant grill had the best fried egg sandwiches. They toasted sourdough bread, fried an egg, and spread cheese and mayonnaise with a heavy sprinkling of pepper and a little bit of salt. Yum. But that was about as good as it gets until Reno. The first year of driving across Nevada, I just hated that whole part of the trip because the interstate is fraught with so many highway patrols everywhere and people pulled over in the yard sales. And as bad as that was, Nevada is just so desolate and brown. Just brown, brown, brown. Like UPS, no other color, just brown. It's scorching hot and dusty in the summers. But after trying to fight our way through all the little two-lane highways through Northern California and Oregon and the constantly changing speeds, those little towns were always going from 25 to 35, back to 55, and back down to 45 and 35, and going up and down and around hills. I began to appreciate the constant speed of 80 miles per hour on the long, straight interstates in Nevada, and the ease of the nicely graded hills and wide bends. It was just so much simpler how we could just set the speedometer anywhere from 79 to 81 miles per hour and didn't have to really think about it unless we were needing to get off at the interstate and get gas. The car practically drove itself as we sailed along the river of the interstate. Throughout the years of our driving career, I finally learned to appreciate the state of Nevada. Well, that's about all the time we have for tonight, kids. Until then, stay out of trouble. And if you happen to be in Valmy, Nevada, stop and try that egg sandwich. And whatever you do, don't do anything I would do. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.